Welcome to the India Fintech Diaries, the only podcast focused exclusively on the Indian fintech market. I'm Elroy.
And I'm Hemant. In each episode, we dive into the latest trends, ideas, innovations, business models, and personalities that are shaping India's fintech landscape.
We also invite amazing guests who are innovators and industry players that are driving the change that is helping make financial services more modern, innovative, and inclusive in India. Come join us as we explore the changing landscape of fintech in India. Welcome back to India Fintech Diaries, the show where we discuss all things Indian fintech. Hi Hemant, what's today's topic of discussion?
Elroy, today we continue our exploration of cross-border fintech. And to discuss this topic, we have a very interesting guest with us today. I'm pleased to welcome Pratik Gandhi, co-founder and chief operating officer of NIUM, the first global B2B payments unicorn from Southeast Asia. How are you doing, Pratik?
I'm good. And firstly, thank you for calling me interesting.
Pratik, you really have had an interesting career, right? Right from working to companies as diverse as Pepsi and Xerox to CFO stints in financial services majors like Citibank, Standard Chartered, Fullerton. Just talk to us a little bit of your interesting background and the journey to co-founding NIUM.
Okay, so as you said, right, it was initially always all about working in bigger organizations. So I started with, in fact, a company called Arthur Andersen, which is now defunct, and pretty much moved
Correct.
to Xerox after just a few months. And then Pepsi was one of my largest stints, 5 years at that time. And then, Citi was another big one, and then Standard Chartered, and then Fullerton. So, all of these were very interesting, large stints. And one thing which is not very well known, and I haven't really spoken too much about it, is the fact that I'm in fact a 2 times failed entrepreneur as well. So I in fact left both Citi and Standard Chartered, so 2 different times, to start a hedge fund which was focused on Indian equity. And the first time it didn't work out because of the global financial crisis. The second time it was another economic event. So, but that whole thing about being an entrepreneur has pretty much always been in the back of my mind. So, the story is like this, that, when I was wanting to do something else, then Fullerton is the company I was working for, but I was working out of Bombay and my family was in Singapore. And there was nothing which Fullerton had in Singapore for me. It was a very small outfit. And so they said, why don't you meet up with the CEO of a company that we have just invested in? So Fullerton had just invested in NIUM at that time. In fact, it was called InstaNIM, wasn't even called NIUM at that time. And so that was the genesis, and sort of Prajit and I hooked it up. It was a great first meeting, and the company was just a few months into operation. And that's really how it started. And, I joined as the chief business officer, went down to head the consumer business. And then eventually, I came into the current role, which essentially looks after most of the back-end stuff, which is not very interesting, but still a fairly important, critical role for the company to have, especially as we grow up. So, I mean, it's been a fantastic journey, right? Because when I joined, the valuation was only some $10 million. 6-7 years down the line, it's where it is. And I still think we are just scratching the surface.
Yeah, absolutely, Pratik. And one thing I have learned from my time in fintech is anything that sounds boring or is considered boring is more profitable than anything that sounds more exciting and more fancy. So that has been my learning. So, Pratik, we are all quite familiar with the retail cross-border payments market. But what really astounds me that the global B2B, business-to-business cross-border payment transaction values are predicted to be exceeding $150 trillion by end of 2022. Now, this is a space that people do not know a lot about. So can you help us understand the market landscape of the global B2B payments?
Okay, so as you said, right, unlike in the case of the remittance market, which is tracked very closely by the World Bank, there isn't a real reliable single source of how, even to establish how big the market is. You gave me a number of 150 trillion. Somebody might say a completely different number. But what we all agree with is the fact that it's running into trillions of dollars. The one thing that is agreed to by all is the fact that it is completely dominated even today by banks. And to be honest, there's a very large segment which is of very large transfers. So let's say single transactions, which are into millions of dollars or $500,000 or, whatever else, which really don't belong to fintech. I mean, those are very well worked out by the banks. In fact, these transactions are typically for larger corporations, and they also get the right attention, when dealing with these large banks in terms of pricing, customer service, etc., etc. So I don't think we even want to be in that. The place where the banks do a poor job is in smaller value transactions. So maybe ranging right from, let's say a transaction which could be 100 or even a less than $100 or so equivalent, to say, up to, let's say $100,000. So these could be in the nature of an e-commerce transaction, or, a hotel payment, or maybe an SME payment, which are not very high in value, but, as far as that company is concerned, that's their bread and butter. And it is here that the banks are unable to give the right service. They're not able to price it right because either their own transaction cost is high, or they're just used to, charging higher profits, to such a category of customers. The result finally is that the customer gets a very raw deal. So that's where, the likes of NIUM comes in. And if you look at the larger landscape, at least as far as the fintech is concerned, there are many fintechs, many profess to be payment companies, but at the end of the day, if you look at it, there's only, very few handful of companies who can say they are giving a global service, right? Otherwise, a lot of the smaller ones will end up using companies like us. And specifically, if you even look at how NIUM operates, I mean, to my mind, there isn't a single company which is a good competitor to us, because our breadth is quite a lot. So we are, very, very global. And second, our depth is pretty high as well in terms of just the kind of products that we do as well. So we do, both we do payments, we do pay-ins, which means, we allow customers to collect funds from another country and send it back to their home country. And we also offer issuance of cards. So something which is global across these various things is not something that you come across. So in my view, you'll have these regional or country specific fintechs, which could be doing a good job in their own realm of influence, but they don't end up becoming very large, from a very global perspective. So that's where, we come in.
Understood. And Pratik, you specifically touched upon that when it comes to slightly smaller B2B payments, that's exactly where banks are not doing a fairly great job. If you have to just dive a little deeper to understand what might be the problems that a user, a consumer is facing in that particular space, how would you list those?
Okay. So, I mean, that really is the reason why we exist, but it's a very, very basic question, and something that I would actually love to spend hours and hours on. But if you look at it from, just a general perspective, for one, the biggest challenge is the fact that there are different regulations which are involved, right? So every country tends to have a different set of rules on what is allowed, what is not allowed. And to a certain degree, this is not only for the non-G10 currencies, but there are some G10 currencies like a Japan, which will also have, how much money can be brought inside and things like that. So if you look at it, I'm just going to spend 1 or 2 minutes on this one. So as a general rule, most countries are okay to receive the foreign exchange, but they apply a lot of restrictions when payments or outflow of foreign exchange is concerned. But even here, there are exceptions to the rule. So there are, like I said, there's a Japan, there's a China, for instance, has restrictions even for funds coming in. So they have a cap on how much an individual can get in a year. Or let's say if funds are being received by a company, they have to be backed by some kind of a documentation and invoice, etc., etc. Even back, I mean, in India, which is where you guys are based, there are some value restrictions on what can be paid for certain kinds of payments. So you get the picture. It's a very tightly controlled sector. Now, when there are restrictions, there are actually more restrictions also for who is allowed to operate, to receive the funds and, pay the funds out of a country. So, typically it's the local banks who end up calling the shots on this one. And I can tell you by experience that there are countries where banks actually take undue advantage of the fact that they have full control on, or let's say they have the regulatory approval to, do these kind of transactions. So example is in the case of in Australia, and this is what we've faced. This is Australia, Hong Kong, in fact, many countries where it's super difficult to even open a bank account for an SME or even someone like an NIUM. I can tell you, we spend months and months, I don't want to name the country, to just open a bank account because they were refusing to deal with us. There is a country which, even for the biggest companies in our sector, they have shut down a lot of, the accounts. We just managed to survive because we've got global tie-ups. So all of this basically ends up, coming to the fact that, it's basically, it ends up being anti-competitive, if I were to keep it in a very simple way, right? And what happens when any one set of entities has a dominant competitive position. The result of all this is that there are going to be high costs to transfer because you don't have anybody who can challenge this, right? So, it's that TINA factor. There is no alternative. And you've heard of the ridiculous cases where as much as 5 to 10% can be taken by banks on FX charges or as fixed SWIFT fees, etc., etc. Plus, there's a complete lack of transparency. So, I mean, if you look at it, they'll not even tell you how much they're charging. And because they'll say, oh, we don't know, there's a correspondent bank somewhere in the middle, and we have no clue how much they will deduct. So if you look at it, there's no impetus to improve the local process because, it can be slow, it can be anything, and there's nobody to challenge it because there is no competition. So that's where NIUM comes in, because we shake up the system. Because in countries where there is a local process, like in India and in fact many countries now, wherever there is a real-time payment which is allowed, we actually enable that. And we do it in a very transparent way. We say upfront how much it's going to cost. So it becomes so much easier for the customer. Now, you should also know that in many cases, our customer ends up being a few banks as well. So, there are banks who use us, they could be country banks or they could be regional banks who want to use it on a global basis. And we are the ones who power these things for them.
Let's turn the focus to NIUM for a bit now, Pratik, right? I've been a follower of NIUM right from its Instagram days. And I think you guys are doing a great job in terms of making cross-border payments simpler for enterprises. I think for the sake of our audience, so can you give us an overview of the product proposition? I know you touched upon the types of products that you have, but it will be great to just maybe spend a minute or two running through the product propositions and who they're meant for.
So we have a very wide variety of the products. One, of course, we continue to have the initial product that we started, which is the person-to-person transfers, but it's a very small component.
Right.
So as you said, that's the InstaNIUM piece. We've still retained the brand because that continues to be a strong one in many countries we operate in. And connected to that is the SME part of it. So look at SME as something which is somewhere in between the larger corporations and individuals, because, there could be many of them which could be small entities, and their requirement is more personal. So in that sense, we keep it under the retail piece. And then, of course, there is the counterpart, which is the payout piece for the larger corporations. This could be, as I said, this could be right from e-commerce companies. This could be banks. This could be other financial companies or fintechs. And basically, their requirement is that we don't want to know what the regulations are, what the local restrictions are, what the reporting requirements are in which country. We want to move X amount of money from one country to another. Please help us do it. So that's a very, it's a very simple sounding thing, but because of the regulatory landscape, it becomes quite complicated. So, and then there is the mirror image of this, which is the receive aspect, which is that, let's say an SME in Singapore wishes to collect from their customer in Germany. And right now their option is that their customer is going to send a SWIFT from their bank, and it's going to charge them an arm and a leg. What we offer them are accounts which are virtual in nature, which can, basically the customer can use. So the customer can give the local collection in that particular, let's say in Germany, that the customer is there. We cite the funds, and then the SME in Singapore can decide whether or not they want to send the money right away back into Singapore, or they want to use it for making a payment to some other country. So these are the payout and the pay-ins aspect of it. The third one is an interesting one as well, because that's the card issuance, and basically it's the white label solution for giving cards. Again, many use cases, most predominantly where SMEs want to use it for, let's say, subscription payments or payments of any small nature, which are basically in foreign exchange. Something which we also did last year, we acquired a company called Exaris, and they are in fact the world's second largest issuer of single-use credit cards. And what that means is they're typically used for payments for in the travel sector and the hospitality sector. So imagine this as to give you a simple example, that let's say you want to go to Thailand, and you go to one of the websites, let's say an Agoda or something, and you say, I want to book a ticket on Thai Airways. You made the payment via your credit card, so the money has already reached Agoda. You got your ticket from Thai Airways.
Right.
Now, at some point in time, Agoda has to settle with Thai Airways. The second aspect of it, and that doesn't have to happen right away. It depends on what the credit terms that Agoda has with Thai Airways. So let's say after a little while, the money has to get paid. That second leg is what is paid by Exaris, and they're a super specialized company in this area, and they're the second largest in the world for it, and they're essentially doing a great job in that. So all of these aspects which are payment related are what is really handled by NIUM.
Got it. Now, Pratik, you touched upon regulation, and I would like to say, for example, from fintech perspective, I only focus on India. And the regulatory environment is so dynamic that my homepage has become RBI and SEBI pages, because every day there's something new. Now, you have a network which spans 190 plus countries. So how do you really manage that regulatory complexity?
So typically there are local experts that we hire. So every country will typically have a country manager, a compliance person, and compliance itself is a very large team in our company.
Right.
We spend a lot on having the technological infrastructure behind it, because none of these things can be done. So let's say if there's a cap to be maintained for how much has to be spent out or sent out, you can't do this manually, right? So it has to be all done in a fairly hands-off manner. So it's a lot of investment that has to be done, even on the creating that infrastructure to enable this kind of a thing. So it's a combination of local expertise, which is what we take, a good deal of compliance people, and a fairly robust technological infrastructure.
Understood. And you touched upon, Pratik, the tech, and within the market, I have spoken to a lot of people, and there is a lot of respect and appreciation for the tech platform that NIUM has built. So can you provide an overview of the technology platform that NIUM runs?
So it's nothing rocket science, but the one thing that we have done well is the fact that it's completely proprietary. And the other thing is that it's very, very modular. So let's say I gave you the list of the various products that we have. So if somebody only wants payouts but not pay-ins or cards, then it's possible. Or someone only wants cards but not the payouts and pay-ins, it's possible. So it's a completely proprietary thing. We employ the best of our developers and engineers, etc., behind this. And in fact, a large component of this is right now based in India.
Okay. Understood. And Pratik, when you speak about payments, the next immediate thing that comes to your mind is, of course, fraud. And controlling fraud or mitigating fraud within one jurisdiction is a task unto itself, which every payment firm strives to solve. Now, you are into cross-border payments. So how are you managing fraud, approaching that particular problem, and ensuring that it is minimized and mitigated?
So, see, the fraud can be into, it can be like a customer fraud of many senses. And then, so one of the biggest areas in which we face, by the way, this is very, very regional as well. It's not as widespread as you might think it to be. But there are countries like the US, for instance. It is replete with, fraudulent cases. So I'll tell you what typically happens, and that's why it's very difficult to establish a business, and we have managed to do it over the last few years of experience. So what happens is that a customer is allowed to fund our account and say that they give instructions and say that we want to, that particular amount equivalent to be sent to another country. So let's say we do it.
Right.
As per the local laws, that customer is allowed to withdraw that amount, and the bank which they have used can actually demand that money back. And the bank is supposed to do it. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that there's, I think, a 72-hour thing or something, or maybe even a longer time. I forget how much it is now, but it is something which the bank it's incumbent upon the bank to do it, right? And there is no choice. So the money which we thought was lying with us can be pulled out, and it's all allowed by the system. It's like any other normal clothes that you can buy in the US and then return it after using them. It's like that. So now that's a typical fraud which happens. We've also faced fraud in countries like Australia, where if you use a particular way in which you receive the funds, by the time the ping comes to us, so we don't wait to actually reconcile the money into our bank account, right? It's all done based upon a technological ping, let's say, which has come from the banker side or the local collection side, and we assume that the money has already been received, or it will come at some point in time. But people who are smart have, at some point in time, they've figured out that there is a way to beat the system. How we get past all this is by building very strong rules of what could be a fraudulent transaction. So there are systems which are invested in to ensure that the amount seems to be completely above board. Because see, remember the fact that in a payments world, by the way, this is not just for fintechs, this is like all across banks also. Anything to do with fintech or rather payments, regulators are looking to us to make sure that we have strong, robust controls where nothing in the variety of money laundering takes place. It's all above board. If there is a problem of a transaction, it is reported equally quickly, etc., etc. So, we have to perforce invest in the right kind of tools, which could be outsourced in many cases, but the rules engines could also be created internally to see how, what seems to be a good above board transaction and what doesn't seem to be a good one. So in which case you just stop it and, just let it pass. So over the period of years, in fact, our fraud rate has come down tremendously. In fact, hardly anything at all now, touch wood. And then the second kind of fraud could be in the cards, and again, that's one thing which I think there is more understanding for, because even banks have this, and, there are well-established rules and regulations which are a part of this. So these are not new, but, basically there'll be some smart person who will figure out something, and they'll surprise you. And then you have to try and stay one step ahead of them at all points in time.
Yeah, totally agree, Pratik. It's always some kind of evolutionary arms race in that sense. That's been a fascinating discussion on your product offering so far, Pratik. I'd also want to understand your journey from a startup to Southeast Asia's first B2B payments unicorn.
Right.
What are some of the challenges that you faced in this journey?
Good question. I think the challenges are several. Many of them are basically related to the regulations, etc. But if you look at it at a higher level, right? What is a company? A company is nothing but an idea and the people behind it. And from here, in my view, if you have the right set of questions, you can even make an idea which is not that unique into something that can be successful. So I'd say that, if people are indeed, one of the most important components of, the differentiation between a successful and a not so successful company, then, we have, especially when it comes to scaling, we have faced, issues on finding the right talent. And honestly, that problem existed even till last year. And it's logical, right? Because, like even with the companies I worked for, like we talked about it, PepsiCo, Citi, Stancy, here we don't have to tell the candidate what the company does. There is a branding that exists. So that's not the case in the case of a company which is not well known like us. So branding becomes an issue. So that only became better when we became a unicorn and the company became a little recognized in the market. Then, we started to get a lot of candidates from good companies, and they started to come. So Now, if you ask me, I think we have a leadership which is more or less in place. I think there are a couple of positions which will get filled up pretty soon. But the process of churn to sort of make sure that the best talent remains is a continuous one. So, which means that, you have to keep identifying the kind of talent that you have, put them into categories. There'll be some which you don't want to lose at any point in time, and you do, much well for them. And then there'll be others who we say, okay, fine, if, it's okay if they don't stick around for a lot longer, and it's okay if they find a better job. Besides that, I think now it's all about how quickly we can do things and, what we want to do. So expand the new geographies for all our products, remain process conscious, efficient, in control, profitable. So all of those things are what will be, I think, the challenges and what we have faced so far.
Pratik, also in the last year or two, right, NIUM has made some very interesting acquisitions. You talked about the Exodus acquisition that you did in 2021. But in 2021, you also acquired Wirecard's India business. And then in 2022, you also acquired Socash. Can you also talk to us about how you're approaching M&A and the value that these acquisitions are now bringing?
Oh, this is one thing that I'm just so super proud of, right? Because as you said, we did this one large corporation. When I say large, it's definitely in relative terms. And then these two small acquisitions, and all of them have been super successful, by the way, right? So, in fact, the Exodus, like I said, is the second largest issuer of single-use credit cards in the world. And really, the sky is the limit for those, because as of now, they are largely focused in Europe. And, only recently they've started expanding into Asia and the Americas. The other aspect of is the fact that, they've brought with them not only a great business, and of course, we bought it at a great time when the travel business was such a hated term. But they've also brought with themselves a very good set of talented staff who's now, in fact, doing well in the larger NIUM framework. Then you talk of the Wirecard entity here in India. I can tell you, it was a very tactical move on our behalf because, we wanted a license. It would have taken us that much time to get the equivalent license, etc. But the way that the entire team has come up. And again, like I said, it's something which we bought at a time when the whole industry was in the doldrums. So timing was, pretty good. But I think if you've been following, I think we have also managed it well because we've let them be. We've given them the right kind of authority, and the independence to basically work with whatever it is that they had. Given them the support, the strength of a large corporation behind them, and just see them prosper. Socash is too new right now, and we do have plans for them as well. Again, in their case, we will be, giving them the flights of imaginations, and what we are telling them is whatever it is that you've built, it doesn't have to be limited to that alone. You can actually do more than just this, and that part of it is something which you'll get to hear in the next few months and years. But overall, it's been a superb journey. What it does for us is that it crashes the time for us to either get a new license or go into a new geography. Like I'll give you the example of Exodus. We were fringe players in the case of Europe, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And we did not have the expertise of how to well manage the cards business. So we got something which had been in existence for like 18, 20 years with all the ups and downs which are a part of the industry. They've gone through all the tough times, the good times, but they are the experts of what they do, right? And with just this one acquisition, we got something which would have taken us years and years to develop. So an M&A is a very powerful tool for us to continue to grow. We will continue to use it. The only thing is that, it's obviously the right time, the right valuation that has to be there. And we've always professed the fact that we are out there in the market looking for more acquisitions.
That's an amazing story, Pratik, because I'm also a strong believer that a good M&A, a successful M&A, is pretty much a combination of art and science. And the industry is, I think, filled with a lot of dead bodies, which would have been amazing heroes, and a lot of biggest of the companies have struggled with actually doing M&A and then taking or generating value out of it for all three parties: the consumer, the acquirer, and the acquired. So it's amazing. Now that we have crossed and NIUM has gone through this very long journey, And the industry is also now looking up because we are pretty much, and fingers crossed, post-COVID, and the travel has picked up. So how do you see the cross-border B2B payment space shaping up in the future? And what's the plan for NIUM as well? A peek into the future.
I think as far as the industry itself is concerned, it's very logical that there'll be some level of consolidation that will happen, right? Because the bigger ones are bound to survive. I'd like to categorize NIUM as one of the larger ones. And, we have, ours is a fairly good operational business. We have all insured to that. So, we don't feel, for instance, in this, so-called winter for the funding, we are not out there in the market looking for funds, for instance, right? We have enough money in the bank. We are turning profitable. So we are not going to be going out and doing things which are stupid. We will be the long run players in this one. Last year was another game. I think when everyone wanted to have higher valuations, everyone wanted to invest in such companies. But I think that time has sort of gone by. And as I said, consolidation will be the name of the game to start with. As far as NIUM itself is concerned, we want to be aggressive in the market, but be careful about it also. What we don't want to do, for instance, M&As where they go wrong is if, for instance, the due diligence hasn't been done properly and there's some, bunch of skeletons that come out tumbling from the cupboard that you had no clue about at that point in time. So we want to be clear that we will buy companies which are good, which give us a very clear advantage in that market and is very, very well synchronized with the rest of the strategy that we have. Definitely more M&As, are there in the future for us. And certainly at some point in time, an undefined future, an IPO, very difficult to put a timeline to it. I know, any interview that I do, this comes up as part of that. So very difficult to figure out when that will happen. But it's on the minds, and when the timing is right, we will do it. But we are getting ready for it, or we are almost ready for it from a back-end standpoint anyway.
That's absolutely amazing. And Pratik, this has been a great conversation, especially in illuminating a corner of the payments market that's not very well known. Of course, NIUM is very well known, but people do not understand how difficult the cross-border payments market is and how it works. Now, if based on this conversation, as listeners want to get in touch with NIUM, whether for the product or maybe for becoming one of your new talents, what would be the best way they can do that?
Go to the website now. Everyone does that. There is a separate page which is there for which positions are open for us, for new employees if they want to be a part of our team, and for both for SME and for the corporate this thing. There's a way in which you can put your details in, and we will get in touch with the prospective customer.
Awesome. So what we'll do, Pratik, is we'll include those links in our show notes as well so that they have it handy. Sure. And thanks once again for coming on the show and spending time with us. Thanks a lot, Pratik.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, guys. Do well.
That's it from India Fintech Diaries for this week. Do log on to your website, indiafintechdiaries.com, for exclusive content. We also cover weekly fintech deep dives in a Substack newsletter, so do subscribe. Until next time, mask on and stay safe.